It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Eduardo Olivarez from the Hidalgo County Health and Human Services Department in Edinburgh, Texas. And he will be speaking about communicating inclusion and exclusion criteria for a registry. Eddie, over to you.
So good morning, everyone. I tell you what, this is a tremendous honor to be here at the Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. We are tasked with one of the most difficult things in our community. It's public health. We work with emergency management, we work law enforcement, we work elected officials. Many times we're seen as the local experts on certain topics and certain things. And definitely we're the go-to person on a lot of things. So since it's up there, let me just talk about that. I'll adapt. I just want to give you an overview of things that you need to think about from a local level. I deal with issues at a very local level, but we got to think of things from a trans-border, transnational issue as well. So I just want to show you that McAllen, Texas, right? There's the tip of Texas, Brownsville, Laredo, Corpus, down the tip of Texas, right in here. If I were to go on a 3-hour drive, and they were telling me you could go 3 hours from here to almost get to Philadelphia from here or some other areas in about 3 hours. Well, one of the things for me that we need to look at it from who gets included in the list, who does not get included in the list. I mean, I think about it from tuberculosis, I think about it from H1N1, I think about it from all these areas that I dealt with in registries. But for me, in other areas along the U.S.-Mexico border and the Canadian border are very important to look at. For us, look, we have 12 to 14 million people that live within that area. It's hard to believe. You never think, how come there's so many people? The city of Monterrey has 7 million people. It is the #1 industrial center and business center in the country of Mexico. So what happens if the event's there? We're going to have a lot of influx coming this way. If, for our porous border, 16 ports of entry, the possibility of us being a target is almost zero. But the reality of some kind of illicit, illegal device being transported into the country is high. Just by the sheer fact, if you think about all the drug interdiction, all the human trafficking, all those things that are happening now, the reality, that is a big concern. But that's all the way from from San Diego to Brownsville, Texas. You look at that entire border, the Texas border is 1,270 miles from El Paso to Brownsville. It is by far more than 3/4 of the border along the U.S.-Mexico border. So for us, that's a big issue. So when we look at who is included, who's not included, we need to consider our transnational partners, our consulates, the embassies, the different organizations that are involved, because how are we going to handle that? Because there's going to be that influx this way or influx out. Now, the other part that came up with some gentleman I was speaking to earlier, during Hurricane Katrina, we had people who came to shelter all the way in South Texas. You're talking about 12, 13 hours away. People went all the way to Washington State for Katrina or Rita. The reality is in a big nuclear event, they're going to come looking at your area. They're going to come to stay with family, friends, where they feel confident they could be at. So we're going to have to look at how we're going to deal with that registry issues and who's involved. Let's move on to the other area over here. Oops, now it doesn't want to move. The big green one, there we go. So let's talk about a few things. Let's talk about your elected officials are going to want to be part of that discussion. Who's included, who's not included. They're going to be up there. You know, the elected officials, you need to be extremely transparent with them, with the most accurate information. In Texas, there's something called home rule that not all states are created equal when it comes to public health. In Texas, the governor can declare an emergency, the county judge can declare an emergency, or even the mayor of a town can, but no one else can. And what's interesting is that if a county judge declares an emergency, not even the governor can countermand it. It's very clear the way things work. Not all states are the same, but since they are the ultimate emergency management director, they are the ones that need to be aware of these things. To me, we've done a lot of things. We've done hurricanes, we've done H1N1. Recently, we did Zika, where we had our own registry. We did over 34,000 tests of pregnant women and their partners to assess for Zika. Peggy's here from CDC, and I got to acknowledge her and Nicole from CDC for their hard work and working with us on that. But, we dealt with a lot of people that were immigrants back and forth. When you're dealing with these issues, that brings unique problems and concepts to look at. Joint Information Center, they need to be involved with this because they're going to help you talk about who's involved and who's not involved in the registry. Remember, you cannot do it by yourself. You need to have your community, your leaders, all have the same message about, well, we decided we're going to really focus on these folks who are the closest to the exposure versus these folks who were like 80 miles away and not near the plume. That's too complicated. What's a plume? Well, who's saying that 80 miles is too far? Well, you need to educate and to make sure that everyone's on the same line because they're going to be helping you deal with who's included and who's not included. Very, very important. Local, state, and federal partnership. It's been demonstrated here today. I learned so much in this last day and a half. And, my trust in the United States and CDC and all our partners here actually has increased. It really has because there's this preconceived situation that when you're dealing with large-scale events, it's like, oh my God, they don't know what we're doing. What do the people in Atlanta know about us down here in the Rio Grande Valley? Or what do the people in D.C., what do the people in Austin, Texas know? Sometimes we even ask ourselves. But the reality is that I see the same conflict at the highest levels, at the 50,000-foot level, as I do at the ground level. And in a weird way, that's almost reassuring that you're thinking the same way I'm thinking. And it's important that when now I call and I'm on that conference call and I'll say a comment like, well, you all don't understand. Well, I'm going to be a little bit more careful about saying you all don't understand because it was very clear that we have the same level of thinking and same concerns when especially you're dealing with human lives. Well, this group gets included, that one doesn't. Do we register for the next 20 years? We're talking multi-generational, as if it's a 7-year-old that was exposed. I'm going to be retired from the health department. The next person is probably going to be retired from the health department. There's going to be 2 or 3 health directors down the road 40 years later that's going to be still following up with that registry from that 7-year-old. Think about that. This is amazing. It's multi-generational in the industry. So we need to look at that. Media. The presenters that came before me, they hit it spot on. The media could be your best friend or could definitely be the one that sends you under the bus. The more you're clear with them, the better. Now, I've learned through Zika, H1N1, I've learned through all these. I work with, it's about relationship building. It's all about relationships. You build relationships with the media, you build relationships with the editors, you build relationships with the news directors. It goes a long way. But when you get an event like this, remember, it starts local and it ends local. But it's also, initially, it's that burst of fear and not knowing what to do. But this is a long-term event, guys. This is going to go on for a long time. It's not going to go away fast. Media doesn't understand that. They want immediate response immediately. They want to answer right now. You need to train your media people ahead of time. We actually have trainings for our news directors, not the reporters, the directors, the ones that decide what stories get on, and actually train them on how we're going to deal with Zika, how we're going to do H1N1, how we're going to do all these things, because they get a better grip of understanding of timelines and response. So include them. Very, very important. Because they're going to be the first one saying, how come I'm not included on the list? I'm a media person. I'm a celebrity. I should be included on the list, Well, let me explain why. And that's important to look at. So when you look at geographical geographical radius and different issues, we talked about that earlier. I'm not going to get into that detail, but I'm going to get into the detail dealing with physicians. Your medical community is key. You need to get in contact with them. Now, everyone's going to have a different opinion, but believe it or not, they understand ICD-10. And there's a reason why they understand ICD-10 real well. Because it's revenue, it's money, right? So there's actually one of the things we did with Zika when we got our local physicians to test over 34,000 women is that they've realized that, hey, there was a return on it. Not only is it good prenatal health, but a good return on it. So they bought into it right away instead of us taking it on our own strictly through public health. Same thing could be done here. Now, is it going to work? I don't know. But you give them that option, you educate them, there's opportunity. They're going to be more on your side in dealing with this than being resistant. So it's very important that you teach them these things. Functional needs support services. Do not forget the special needs areas. Your people who, my daughter is actually getting a she's graduated with university with communication disorders, and she's actually getting an advanced certification in sign language. I did not realize the size of our population in our community until she took part in that class. Your hearing impaired community, your blind community, your mental health community. In my community, I have over 800 people who are of advanced psychiatric diagnosis who live in halfway homes or three-quarter homes in my county that I have to deal with for evacuation and different things. That's a community you need to look at. Very important. Look at the functional needs support services in your community. Include them in the planning and include them in who gets included and doesn't get included in the registry, because they may come back and say, guess what? You're not including me because I'm blind. You don't think I know any better? No, you need to include them and be part of the dialogue. Very, very important. Off the grid. This one's a very controversial and hard one, but I feel very confident talking about it. Because in my community, my county has 870,000 people officially. We're the 7th largest county in Texas, but my unofficial population is 1.3 million. Why? Because of our immigration. Off the grid people. Off the grid. You don't know they're there, but they're there. And we have hundreds of thousands of them, okay? So how are you going to deal with them? How are you going to deal with CBP, Customs Border Protection? How are you going to deal with the different immigration folks? You need to get them to the table to be part of planning. Use them as a partner, not as an adversary. We do really well with our CBP folks. Recently, you've seen all this immigration crisis going on. It's very important that we look at that. So we need to include them in the planning. And those off-the-grid people, they have lives too. How are you going to track them? Inner city, urban areas, of course, like the homeless. For us, the same thing, homeless plus immigration. And then not only that, but if you have stash houses where there's hundreds of people that are hiding from immigration, and all of a sudden that's a near an exposure area, those people are going to run and get away into the wilderness, but they have not been decontaminated. They're going to continue to expose people all along the way. You need to plan that through. Real quick, I'm not going to get into large detail. You already talked about low risk and high risk. We talked about long-term effects. That's been discussed plenty, but you need to include it in your media plan and include it in your education of elected officials. Oops. We talked about first responders. I really just want to focus. I only got a couple of minutes. I want to focus on this part. The behavioral has not been emphasized enough. I know everyone's talked about it, but until you leave here today, you got to talk about it more. Because being a firefighter, I was a firefighter for many years. I'm the assistant emergency management coordinator for their county. This is huge, and it's their family. You need to look at that. In fact, if you could actually pre-register your first responders and have a medical history on each and every one of them ahead of time, actually pre-register them and have them ready on the list, that'd go a long way, especially if they're exposed to any type of event. Very, very important to look at. And just observations. Public health, safety, and security is paramount. We need to be elevated to not necessarily first responder. We're not running into the burning house, like I said earlier, but we are definitely there as support to our first responders. And not only that, but you got to deal with the long-term recovery. So when you're dealing with public health, we may be finished with the law enforcement and fire side the first few days, but the next 3 or 4, 5, 6, 8 months, or this time 20 years, is going to be recovery. It's very important that public health be elevated to a different level, and we encourage our partners at the federal level to really support us with that. Mental health and family support is critical. Sustainability. I'm not going to go there. You guys already talked a lot about it. We talked about funding and money, but the reality is the inclusion and exclusion is not limited to clinical needs. It's not limited to exposure. There's a lot of political, local, emotional feelings involved in that whole development. I thank everyone for being here. Orania, thank you for your support, and thanks to everybody. Have a good day.